All right, Anthony on Air podcast back for another episode. We're calling this 2 Minute Tuesday. We're going to discuss day 2 of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Jane's testimony will be our primary focus today. And then we're also going to touch on Chris Cuomo, who was suspended indefinitely by CNN. As I promised, we're going to do every single day of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So on our Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, we'll do our normal show. Tuesdays, we'll do a 2 Minute Tuesday, even though this will last longer than 2 minutes. We'll do 3 Minute Thursdays just to keep you guys updated on the day's events of what happened in the trial. It was an interesting day, too, for sure. The testimony of Larry Visoski continued. We started this in day 1. And again, if you missed day 1, we'll put a link in the description of this episode on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, if you're listening via podcast, you can catch up at anthonyonair.com, but we'll be covering every single day. So make sure you guys are subscribed. Make sure you have that bell notification on YouTube so you know when we go live with the latest report of the day's happening. So Epstein's former pilot, Larry Visoski, he was back on the stand today to start the day. We ended day 1 with him, as I said. He spoke more this morning in court about what he had seen as the pilot for Jeffrey Epstein. He repeatedly stated in his testimony, I found this to be pretty interesting, that he couldn't really see what passengers were doing while he was flying. He said that he never saw any sort of sexual activity on the planes. When asked if all the women passengers over the years appeared to be adults, he responded, quote, "Oh, absolutely," end quote. He did, however, recall Jane, who traveled on the Epstein flight for years as a teenager. He described her as a, quote, mature woman with some piercing powder blue eyes, end quote. Jane, obviously, in court, will focus a lot on her. But one last thing we want to get to before that is the end of this Visoski testimony. But what I found interesting was he said that they all appeared to be adults, yet he acknowledged that Jane, who was underage, was on the flights for years. So a little bit of a contradiction in his own testimony from Lawrence Visoski this morning. He was asked by questioned by Maxwell attorney, Christian Everdell, during cross-examination. Visoski was able to remember some of the powerful figures who flew on Epstein's jets. If you've been listening or watching the podcast for a while, most of these names are not going to surprise you. John Glenn, astronaut John Glenn, George Mitchell, Donald Trump, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, Prince Andrew, and of course, Bill Clinton. It was a lot of names. They also pointed out that Visoski signed a non-disclosure agreement when he became Epstein's pilot. Even after this early stage of the trial, it's clear that Epstein is going to be a big part of this case. Jane testified about Epstein and Maxwell. When she took the stand, she spoke about the fact that Epstein and Maxwell often bragged, especially about Donald Trump or Bill Clinton. When they would call and Jane was around, Epstein and Maxwell would often put them on speakerphone. Epstein mentioned these connections before allegedly sexually abusing Jane, who remembers him saying, "I know all the agents, all the photographers, and the owner of Victoria's Secret." Before ending her direct examination of Jane, Assistant U.S. District Attorney Allison Moe took some steps to address what already appeared to be a central component of the trial. At Moe's prompting, Jane testified that the compensation fund for the Epstein victims awarded her $5 million, of which, following litigation fees, she received $2.9 million. Moe asked if Jane's understanding the jury's verdict in the trial will affect her compensation and whether she has any financial stake in the trial. Her response there was no and no. Jane is, interestingly enough, testifying anonymously. So for a lot of the people that are angry or outraged, upset as to why this isn't on television, this case, this would be indeed one of, not the main, but one of the reasons why a case like this wouldn't be televised. Now, obviously, we've seen cases in the past that were televised and the witnesses aren't shown. Obviously, that's a possibility, but that's not the course of action that Judge Nathan chose to take in this particular case. But when Jane took the stand right after Larry's testimony, she instructed the courtroom sketch artists not to depict Jane too closely. So you will see some sketches of Jane. They're out there if you search for them. But everything is a sort of nondescript depiction of Jane, who is now 40, by the way. But during her primary time with Epstein and Maxwell, she was 14, 15, and 16 years old. She also instructed reporters that were in the courtroom not to ID, to respect the journalistic ethics, and not to ID people who say they are survivors of sexual assault. So her identity is being held in the highest regard, which is a good thing. They asked her why she was Jane. That is, they asked her why she is testifying anonymously, and her response was because there is still victim shaming even till this day. Which, I mean, you can't disagree with. She's not telling a lie there. You put yourself out there. Look, if this is me and I have an option of putting myself out there or not putting myself out there, I'm not putting myself out there. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who would choose to put themselves out there. That's a tough role to take on, you know. So let's start with Jane's testimony. She was asked if she was sexually assaulted by Epstein. Her response was more than once when she was 14 years old. She was asked who was most frequently in the room when Jeffrey Epstein assaulted her. Her response was Ghislaine Maxwell. Into the evidence was submitted under seal, by the way, a photograph of her at the age of 13. So again, it's allowed to be evidence. It will remain under seal. It will not be released. Jane testified that her father's death from leukemia and her family's difficult economic situation is what led her to meeting Epstein and Maxwell in the first place. She was talking about her studies at the Interlochen Academy, which is this renowned art school in Michigan, of which Epstein was a donor of. Epstein's pilot also talked about the camp in the morning session. Jane was describing the first meeting between Maxwell and Epstein and her for the first time. She said that she thought Maxwell and Epstein seemed very friendly. She says, quote, "I thought they were a married couple. They seemed very inquisitive." She asked how she would wind up at Jeffrey Epstein's house. She said that Epstein would often send his chauffeur for her. They asked her if she had a driver's license at the time, which I thought was a strange question when she said she was 14, 13, 14, 15. She said no. She recalls visiting Epstein's pool and seeing at least 4 women and Ghislaine and remember them being topless. She even said that some of the women were completely naked. She recalls Maxwell giving her some dating advice at one point. I mean, this is inappropriate. Like we haven't even gotten to the worst parts of it all yet. And even this is inappropriate to have a middle-aged woman talk to a 14-year-old like this. She told Jane this is Ghislaine Maxwell talking to Jane, quote, "Once you fuck them, you can always fuck them again because they've been grandfathered in." Jane recalls laughing because she didn't understand the word grandfathered. She didn't know what that meant at the time. Jane gave some examples of famous people that they boasted about: Donald Trump, Bill Clinton. As I said, she even mentioned Mike Wallace, which I feel like we've talked about once before on the podcast, but I don't remember Mike Wallace being a prominent name in all our past discussions. But she did name check Mike Wallace this morning. She was 14 years old when she had her first contact with Epstein sexually. Prosecutors asked her to describe to the jury what happened. She was taken inside the pool house at his Palm Beach home. She said he pulled his sweatpants down, pulled her on top of him, and proceeded to masturbate on her, and then he left. She says, quote, "I was frozen with fear. I had never seen a penis before." Another instance, she says that Epstein and Maxwell started to fondle each other and casually giggling about it in front of her. Jane says she was 14 at the time. She was asked how Epstein liked to be massaged, and she said that he liked to be massaged, quote, hard, quote, twisting his nipples hard, rubbing his feet hard. Jane says that there were all these mixed emotions going through her when she was 14. She explained that you don't really know what's going on. She said he would touch my breasts, he would touch my vagina. They asked her if she touched Epstein's body. She replied yes. They asked her where. She replied everywhere. Prosecutors apologized for having to ask the question, but asked about Epstein and sexual toys. Jane said, quote, he liked to use vibrators, which were of different sizes. He liked to use back massagers, which were very painful. He would put it on my vagina, even if I said it hurt. Jane says that other people were sometimes present during the abuse. She would start taking her clothes off, and Jeffrey would get on the massage table, and it would turn into this orgy. That seems to be the big headline today as I perused a lot of the articles that were being written and a lot of the stories that were unfolding from the day's events. This line, he would get on a massage table and it would turn into this orgy, seems to be the big line that everybody is going to. Obviously, look, this is not our regular podcast. This is just an update on Ghislaine and day 2 of the trial, but this is horrific shit. I mean, this is pretty horrific stuff. It's disgusting, and it's hard to read all these things. You think about this poor girl, 14, 15, 16 years old. These are pretty horrific things to go through. And, as we talked about in the past, and as you saw in the Netflix documentary, where some of the victims were speaking, these people, they preyed on individuals that were, hurting, lost her father, tough economic situations, all these awful, scenarios. It's like a sixth sense with some of these, I have to say this, alleged predators, where you just kind of know people who are, more susceptible to these kinds of things. And a little girl who's just lost her father, who's grown up in a tough home, that's exactly the kind of person that they're shooting for. More on this. I just have to pause for a moment and thank our good pals over at Jumpstart Coffee Company. As you see right there, I'm enjoying myself some dark blend as we speak. They're the proud sponsors of the podcast. They keep the show going. They keep the lights on here at the Anthony on Air podcast. So if you appreciate any of the information, you're looking for some great Christmas gifts, some Hanukkah gifts to give out, holiday gifts for the coworkers, your employees, your employers, whatever the case may be, a Jumpstart Coffee Company is going to be perfect for you. You can save 15% off right now with the promo code AOA15 when you order by using the link in the description of this episode or by clicking on the banner on the homepage of anthonyonair.com. 50% of all the proceeds from Jumpstart Coffee Company go to the Navy SEAL Foundation. So not only are you supporting this podcast, but you're also supporting the Navy SEALs who provide us with our freedoms. It's a wonderful American thing to do. Buy some Jumpstart Coffee Company this holiday season. If you order more than $50 worth after you use your promo code AOA15, they're going to throw in free shipping. They'll pick up the shipping for you. That's a nice gesture. And don't forget, if you're looking for a bigger gift, like if you got to spend like under $20 for, Secret Santa or a grab bag or whatever, 1 or 2 of these is great. If you're looking for a bigger gift for mom or dad, your brother, maybe he's serving, National Guard, whatever, veteran in your life, you can get the subscribe and save. That means that they'll send you 1 or 2 or however much coffee you go through every single month. And you save by doing that as well. So you could spend $100 and get somebody coffee for a year, give or take however much you're using. And you're helping the Navy SEALs, you're helping the Anthony on Air podcast. It's a great thing all around. We appreciate your support. If you're supporting Jumpstart Coffee Company, want to thank those guys. Again, promo code AOA15, order with the link in the description below, or click the banner on the homepage of anthonyonair.com. Back to the testimony here. Jane said that she was also in New York, was also abused in New York. She says, quote, if it wasn't an orgy in the massage room, it was in Jeffrey's bedroom, where she says she would typically be alone with him. The abuse also happened when she was 14, 15, and 16. She was emotional during her testimony. She said, quote, I felt my heart sinking into my stomach. Asked why. As her voice cracked, she said, because I didn't want to see him. At this point, Judge Nathan decided to take a 10-minute recess. Court adjourned. When they came back, she got a little bit more into her mother and her situation, because you're probably thinking at this point, like, how did her mom allow this to happen? Like, where was mom during all this? She said that she didn't tell her mother about any of the sexual abuse because she felt ashamed. She thought it was her fault, and in a household where she was raised, you didn't speak unless spoken to. She said, quote, I was afraid that I would be in trouble if I said something. Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe asked her if she considered self-harm. She replied yes. Her voice cracked as she described things seeming hopeless. She did at one point speak to a school guidance counselor about her sadness, but she didn't admit any of the abuse. She said her mother slapped her and told her she shouldn't tell anyone about her feelings and what's going on at home. So, again, to paint a little picture for you, you're like, where's mom? Where's the family? What are they doing in all this? Her mom slaps her just for being sad. That's a terrible thing. Could you imagine? I mean, you're sitting there like, why, you go to your mom, go to your family, speak to somebody about him. Well, here she is. She's just depressed and her mom's, slapping her. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to go through. I mean, it's it's a tough situation all around. You lose the father of the family, mom loses the husband. Leukemia is a shitty, tough thing to go through for anybody. I think we all know somebody who's, been impacted by cancer of some form or another. Tough thing. And, you add on top of that here are these rich and powerful people paying attention to you. Her mom, as Jane testifies, thought it was a good thing. Thought it made her special. Like, look, my daughter must be good. She's getting all this treatment. Initially there was movies, there was, popcorn, it's all these like nice things as they're luring this poor little girl in, as a parent, there's something to that. I mean, I can, I certainly can attest to that. Like, I'm surprised. I'm a parent of a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I'm still new to the game, but I'm surprised like how wonderful I feel when a teacher, in my kid's school goes, oh, your son did good today, or your daughter did great today. Like, yes, like people like, oh, yeah, I'm proud of her. But like that feeling that you get is like unbelievable. So I just put myself in this situation where you're this mother, they're working hard. They themselves, by the way, lived in a pool house. So not a lot, obviously tough economic situation. You lose your husband and all of a sudden, these people are showing interest in your daughter. I'm not justifying her. I'm not defending the mom, but I understand that feeling of having a total stranger suddenly give your child a compliment. It makes you feel good. I mean, it does. It's just being honest. Now I wouldn't allow this to happen. I wouldn't allow my kid to go somewhere, be alone in a room with people, but like I said, like even, coaching my son in flag football, and the other coach is like, oh, your son did good today. It's like, I'm surprised sometimes about how good the feeling is. So again, not defending the mother here, but I could certainly understand the dynamic of emotions and how, they could be manipulated and taken advantage of. I can certainly see that for sure. About the attention, Jane said that she initially felt very special. She didn't have much support or attention at home. Asked about the long-term impacts of her experience with Epstein and Maxwell, Jane asks, how do you navigate healthy relationships with a broken compass? I didn't know what real love was supposed to look like. It ruined my self-esteem. It ruined my self-worth. They asked her why she was testifying anonymously. As I alluded to earlier, she said victim shaming is still present until this day. Cross-examination began. The first question basically was, why did you wait 20 years to report these happenings to law enforcement? The defense attorney asked a series of questions about where Jane lived and where she went to school. The allusion, she was alluding to the fact that they were trying to undercut her testimony about her family's financial struggles when she said she met Maxwell and Epstein. Just as the cross-examination began, time was basically up on the day and court was adjourned. So much like with Larry Visoski yesterday, they just started getting into his testimony and they had to stop for the day. Same thing here. Larry in the morning, Jane primarily through the rest of the day with the prosecution. Defense gets the chance at it, and then as they get started, court adjourns for the day. So it seems like, why did you wait so long? You know, were you really in financial dire straits? And they're going to go through all these sort of things. I also noticed something in Jane's testimony when they asked her basically how many times did these abuses occur. She said, I don't remember. Which I felt like, obviously I'm not shaming her here. That's an honest answer, but that's a tough answer if you're the prosecution. Not that you could possibly remember something that happened to you multiple times over 3 years, but I'm sure that these defense attorneys are going to climb all over that and harp on the fact that she can't remember. They'll probably wind up saying to her tomorrow, you testified yesterday that you couldn't remember how many times this happened. Is that true? Can you put a number on it? Can you put a ballpark on it? I don't know if they'll ask her for a ballpark, but I'm just saying they're going to harp on the fact of, oh, well, you don't remember this. And they're going to ask her other questions. Were you in New York? How many times were you in New York? I don't remember. Oh, you don't remember how many times? So they're going to do all these things to undercut her and take the seriousness out, because don't forget, as we've spoken about pre-trial, they were talking about bringing in that expert and having them testify about false memory. You think you remember something a certain way, but it didn't really happen that way. So that's coming down the line and everybody knows it. Maybe the jury doesn't know it, but everybody else kind of knows it. So they're all going to be setting up some of these victims for that moment, and they're going to be bringing back some of that testimony. When that expert takes a stand, they're going to be in there going, Jane testified to not remembering. Is this all part of false memory? Yes, it is, so on and so forth. So that's basically day 2 of the trial there. So feels like everybody got something of what they wanted, where the names of Clinton and Trump and, all these big names got put out there. That seems to be a big story. And of course, that salacious headline that we talked about earlier about the fact that every time the guy came into the room and took off his clothes, it sort of turned into an orgy. This is, it's, it's unfortunate shit. It's sickening shit. I really don't love going through all this stuff, but, we made a promise that we were going to cover this trial, since we first started talking about this stuff well over a year ago. And we certainly do have a lot of podcasts on the topic. So, we're going to see it all the way through. Like I said, every day we'll have an update for you here on our podcast, whether you're listening via Spotify or, Apple podcast or Google podcast or Stitcher or whatever, or you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed and you're hitting the thumbs up on the videos. Same thing with Facebook. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following. Make sure you're getting notifications on Facebook. And, of course, hit the thumbs up there. That helps us an extraordinarily amount. That's a big, big help for us all the way around. Obviously, like I said, this is going to be the Tuesday. We'll do a quick thing. Thursday, we'll do a quick thing, just a recap of what happened to the day. We're still going to be doing our regular Monday, Wednesday, Friday podcasts that are a little bigger. We'll, of course, still touch on the day's news with Ghislaine and the trial, and then we'll go through all our normal topics. But these Tuesdays and Thursdays are going to be left exclusively to Ghislaine, with one exception. which is the fact that CNN suspended Chris Cuomo today indefinitely. We do have to touch on that since we were talking about that last episode. We'll talk about it again a little bit on the Wednesday podcast because, of course, I want to get Frank and Janine's opinion on everything. But we discussed how Chris Cuomo not interfered, but was there to sort of aid and help out his brother. He was trying to get, sources and information on some of the women that were coming forward and, basically abusing his journalistic position. We talked about it yesterday, him being in an ethical soup here. Good soup. We said, how is CNN going to respond to this? This was all new information that came to light. Attorney General Letitia James just released all these text messages between Melissa DeRosa and Chris Cuomo, and it showed that he was trying to get information on these women that were coming forward. He was prepping his brother. He was involved way more than he let CNN on to know, which, if you believe that, I don't know how true that is, but that's what CNN's standpoint is. And so the word just came down that they're going to be suspending him indefinitely. Why not just fire him right off the bat? I don't know. Would they attempt to bring him back eventually? I don't know. Would they keep him around and sort of like you pop on every now and then, you lose your show, but you're still a contributor to the station? I don't know. I don't know what their thoughts are. I'm sure they're just keeping their options open because they have to pay him. He's got a contract, unless they want to prove that his behavior was harmful, which is another lawsuit altogether. They could spend millions fighting that and trying to get out of it and then still have to pay him anyway. It might just be cheaper to pay out the rest of his contract, whatever it is. Perhaps that's where the indefinite suspension comes from. And for those of you who don't know, like when it comes to entertainment, contracts and deals, if I have a year and a half left on my deal, or if I have a year left on let's say they have a year left on his deal and he's making $4.5 million a year. You're better off suspending him indefinitely, taking him off the air and paying him than firing him, having him file a wrongful termination suit, because then they have to prove all this shit or, have it to go to court and lawyers. Like I said, sometimes it's easier to just, we'll pay you your money, we'll take you off the air, and we'll let this ride out, and we won't renew your contract when it comes up. That could be it. Could be up at the end of the year. Could be up in 3 months. Who knows? But this feels like a firing. Again, like I said, if they don't come out and fire him, perhaps that's why. And look, he deserves to be fired. This isn't a cancel culture issue. This is you're just really shitty at your job issue. And, like what I said, and again, I've been doing this for years, and I know what it's like to go out there and earn the respect of an audience, to have them follow you, to have them, buy your sponsors' products and, purchase your merchandise and all this stuff. You don't take that for granted. You appreciate all of that. I appreciate every time somebody buys some Jumpstart Coffee Company. We're running our Cyber Week deal right now. You can save 15% off, promo code TWSS15. That's what she said. TWSS15 promo code. Use it at shopanthonyonair.com. You save 15% on all our merch. I appreciate everybody that buys, a shirt or a mug, or whatever. And I wouldn't take that for granted. And in this particular instance, Cuomo put his brother in front of his audience. He wouldn't report on anything that was happening with his brother. He said it was too close. That's bullshit. You got a job to do. You pick up the phone, you call your brother, you say, I'm sorry I got to do this, but this is my job. This is my gig. I'm going to report on this like normal. I won't write the stories. I'll just read them. Whatever you got to, I get you. Okay, you don't want to do that or whatever. But you're basically, primetime spot in one of the big cable networks, and you're saying, oh, this huge story we're just not going to talk about because I'm related to the person. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. And then then you get your network to agree to that, which is insane to me. I mean, I've held a lot of radio jobs. If I went in there and said, oh, I'm not going to talk about this major thing because of my personal feelings on it, they would have fucking laughed me out of the room. But then while you're doing that, you're going behind their back, you're calling your sources, you're trying to get information on the victims so that you can shame them and embarrass them and put information out about them to kind of help your brother through, who was allegedly doing these terrible, awful things. You're a shitty fucking human being. You might think I'm being a good brother, and that may be, but you're a shitty fucking human being. And on top of that, you're a shitty host. And if there's one thing I know about it, it's being a host. And like I said, maintaining a relationship with an audience. And this guy was just fucking abusing his audience. And there's no excuse for that. There is no excuse for that. You do your fucking job. I don't care who it is. Your brother, your father, your mother. You know what? They shouldn't have done their shitty stuff to put you in that position in the first place. You go in there, you do your job every day. It's a shitty thing it's a bad position to be in. Bad. But you got that audience. They're there with you every night. They sit through the commercials. They patronize your sponsors. They buy your shit. They buy your fucking books when you come out with them. They watch you on other shows. They're loyal to you, and that's how you repay them. That's shitty, man. That's pretty shitty. By the way, everybody at CNN has turned on this fucking guy. Like everybody. Every single one of them. The New York Post had some quotes anonymously from some CNN staffers. One said, "How does he still have his job at the network? He's not a journalist." Another person at CNN said, "Cuomo primetime has the lowest ratings to date. The viewers no longer trust him. His reign at CNN has to end." Exactly. Why would you trust him? If you're a loyal fan of CNN, which if you are, you should, reevaluate some shit. I mean, how anybody's watching CNN, Fox, MSNBC, or Newsmax is beyond me. They're all dog shit these days. They're just awful dog shit. But how could you trust anything the guy fucking says? He put your values, your views. He's supposed to inform you. He put that on the back burner for his brother. Why would you go back to that? Which is why you don't do it in the first place. I've been screaming about this from day one. Even people on the podcast gave me a hard time about it. But this is why you don't do it. You fucking lose the room. It's done. You're over. Another CNN staffer said Chris Cuomo enabled a sexual predator, the former governor of New York. He needs to immediately resign or CNN must fire him. Does Chris Cuomo have any journalistic integrity? No. Elisa Batista, one of the women's rights group, a member of the women's rights group Ultraviolet, said Cuomo should be fired immediately for using his position at CNN to seek information on the accusers. This is a severe breach of journalistic ethics. CNN should immediately sever ties with Cuomo. Anything less is unacceptable and further harms survivors of sexual abuse. Yeah, I think firing him would have been a stronger statement. But again, if I had to guess, knowing what I know about the entertainment industry, contracts and everything like that, it's probably cheaper for them to suspend him indefinitely and just let it all go away. Which opens up another big possibility in question, which is who fills that 9 o'clock role. I think he's on at 9. Is it 8 or 9? I don't even know what time. I think it's 9, because I think Don Lemon's on at 10. Is Wolf still on at 8? I don't even know. But that's a big role. That's a big time slot at CNN. So I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people jockeying for a position there on who gets that Chris Cuomo time slot. So we'll see. Of course, like I said, we'll probably pick up on this a little bit more tomorrow. We'll update you on day 3 of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and the finishing of the testimony from Jane. So come back for that. And of course, a lot of people, I see all the complaints out there. Who's covering Ghislaine Maxwell? Who's covering Ghislaine Maxwell? We're covering Ghislaine Maxwell. So don't just, tweet who's covering Ghislaine Maxwell. Tweet the podcast. Share it with your friends and family. Let them know what's going on. We're here every day recapping the day's events of what happens during the trial. So make sure you pop up here and, spread the word a little bit about what's going on in the Anthony on Air podcast. Let people know. You're worried about who's covering the case? Your old pal Ant's covering the case. And again, grab some Jumpstart Coffee Company. Helps us put on the podcast every single day. Also, grab some merch from the shopanthonyonair.com store. As you can see here, we got a lot of fun products from the podcast. our silhouette shirt, our microphone sweatshirt, our legalized comedy t-shirt. We got the steel tumbler right there. Our new black mugs just hit the store. We brought back the That's What She Said products. And they're all 15% off right now when you use the promo code TWSS15. That's TWSS15. Save 15% off right now. Promo code TWSS15 at shopanthononair.com. Appreciate you guys for sticking around. I miss Jay Sabs and Frank too. They'll be back on the regular Wednesday schedule. We'll catch you guys then.